shit's pretty helpful. That's why I really think maybe we should intro and then I'll talk about this, but whatever. I really think that it would be helpful to eventually have TypeScript on home games, especially because we want people who aren't us to make games, having a TypeScript layer in between so that they can know, like, oh, a game node needs these things in these types. It can't just be anything. It wants them to be of this type. That could go a long way, I think. It could be really helpful for people like that.
See, I don't disagree. Like, at a high level, I think when it becomes a community project, when it's not what it is right now, I would argue it's like not really a community project at the moment, whereas something like, any major real open source project, I guess, kind of would be, because you kind of owe it to your community and for that consistency across, potentially hundreds or thousands of people or whatever, it makes sense. But the core, like, idea of know what this method or function accepts, you don't need TypeScript for that. You just need a document. You just need a piece of documentation that says, hey, this game node accepts this, or look at an example. Game node accepts this. Like, I understand that that's not as it's a little bit more friction or whatever than one would expect in a kind of a real project. That's kind of what I'm saying. But it seems like there's also a cost, a kind of significant cost. Like, for example, it would add a build step. We literally don't have a build step at the moment. Like, it's just this thing is interpreted by your browser. This thing runs, in your node environment, whatever. Like, there is no build. And for someone who's new to programming, who ultimately is my number one person, like, obviously I think it's great if someone who's experienced makes something for home games. But I think a big part of it is getting amateurs, people who are figuring things out. And in the same way that when I was learning JavaScript, it was really hard to find, because I'm just building up concepts in my head. I'm trying to figure out the distinction between jQuery and JavaScript. I'm trying to figure out why the $sign syntax doesn't just work in my Drupal website. Like, that was the kind of frustration that I had. And it's because I just did not understand concepts. And so for someone coming into something where it's like, okay, well, these are .ts files, and so I have to understand that, like, this is all interpreted by some system that then spits out something else that I really can't read as easily as, like, you can read it, but it's like it's harder than just like going to GitHub and seeing the thing and knowing that that's exactly what's running. It adds process, and it adds kind of technical weight. And for this initial phase, right, like the initial typing phase, it will be kind of a pain in the ass. But the promise is that ultimately, like, or in the end, we're not really adding a whole lot of core foundational stuff to home games. So the types are the types. Maybe we make updates, but it's not like we have to do continuous work to maintain it or to update it or whatever, which is nice. It just seems like something else that I don't need, and it's like, I have such a thing, because working like a real job, obviously you have to depend on a lot of third-party things just because of the nature of it. And part of the thing, like with home games, is like, no, what do you need? What is the core concept? What is the fundamental thing that makes this work? Anything else is just extra. So, like, that's the thing in my head right now for TypeScriptification, even though I know it's inevitable at some point that we're going to have to move over, and I'm fine with that. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm going to push back as frequently as I can, because you know what I mean? I'm just delaying the inevitable.
I guess that's not very stoic of you. That's maybe my comment to you, whether something is stoic or not stoic. But at any rate, my argument on that would be that TypeScript gives you type safety and errors around typing, which are easier to parse and understand than whatever home games is going to give somebody if they gave us the wrong type for something. If, for example, home games was expecting an array and expecting a number and we sent an array, for instance, like if for whatever reason somebody messed up their code and instead of sending like a color that was, a one-dimensional array, 4 entries, they sent a one-dimensional array with 6 entries, that's not going to work. Home games is going to do something. The squish function is going to not like that. Or they're going to not get their expected result, basically. Whereas TypeScript's protection and guarantee would be, you sent me something with 6 elements. I can only accept 4 elements, and one of them was a string, and all my elements needed to be numbers. So try again. And I think that kind of protection is easier for somebody who's new to programming to read and be like, this says it's expecting a string. What is a string? This is a string. I see where I went wrong. I'll change that. You know what I mean? And it happens before you even save the file, it'll be like, here in your text editor, you fucked up. Something went wrong. You're giving me the wrong thing. And I think that protection is more valuable than just the documents would give somebody. Like, not only is it covering the like use case of documentation, but it's like a living document in that the code itself is the documenter for like what the arguments in and out need to be. And I think that's like in my head, like the promise of TypeScript is just that like guaranteed type protection, guaranteed like you fucked up. This is the wrong type. This is the right type. That kind of information. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. And again, I'm not arguing against TypeScript. Like I fully agree with you. But at the same time, I just don't want it. If that like it's too much for right now, I guess. And it's what I'm saying. Like at some point it will be the thing. And for the thing about like catching it before you even run it, that's great. But and maybe this is like some early boomerism that's starting to develop in me because I guess at this point, like we've been doing this for 10 years or whatever, just programming in some way. But I truly think the best way to learn is to do it wrong a lot. And if you have the thing accepting 4 and you give it 6 and you spend an afternoon or an evening or a weekend and you're like, what the fuck? Why isn't this working? And then you figure it out, you will never forget that shit is 4. And like, not the specifics of home games, but the practice of how you got there, right? Like you won't make that mistake. It's a rookie mistake. Why would you assume the array length? Or why would you assume it works like this? Or why would you like bang your head against it and suffer until you get great? And like at this phase, I think we're still in that when it is already great. And it's just like, hey, come on and make fixes for, fix typos and add documentation and fix minor bugs and whatever. But it's already great. At that point, when it becomes a community project, sure, add TypeScript. But right now, like, it's the fucking trenches, brother. You know what I mean? Like, let's hang out in the trenches longer.
Converting to TypeScript takes longer the more files you have to convert.
Sure, but we're not going to have more files. I mean, well, sure, more files, whatever, but
it becomes more difficult linear in terms of like big O of conversion to TypeScript is linear with like the amount of code you need to convert.
But at the end of the day, there isn't much code and there won't be that much code. Like it is what it is, which is something I've been saying a lot lately.
It is true.
It is the code and whatever, like we will make changes and we will make whatever, but I think TypeScript adds too much sludge in our already kind of fucky gears that we have running this system, and I don't think it makes me happier or it makes me faster or it makes me more useful because I don't need, that's what I'm saying, I don't need a 6 character instead of 4 character warning, but someone else down the road will. And when the project gets, when the project is no longer ours, we will add that for the sake of the community. Yeah. Again, I'm not arguing against it. I want to be a boomer for a little bit longer and just write JavaScript like we used to, back in the day. Console.log. Whatever happened to var, What was this new Latin const? Anyway, that could be the intro, and we can just go from there because that was just like some loose thoughts on TypeScript after I've been working with TypeScript in another context, I guess, for the past few weeks, and yeah.
Can the name of this episode be what happened to var? It's a good name for an episode. What episode number is this? 116?
Oh, that's a fantastic question.
115 is my guess.
I was just gonna say there's a very popular song at the moment called "What Happened to Virgil." So maybe we'll get kind of like apple bottom jeans situation where someone just fucks up talking to Siri, and then they get us they get an hour of nerds talking instead. This is episode 115.
Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 115 of the Home Games Podcast. I'm Yazeed, and this is Joseph.
Hello, my name is Joseph, and today is Tuesday, August 30th, 2022. I don't really have a whole lot of changes or updates or anything like that besides what I was just talking about with the TypeScript thoughts. And yeah, I guess since we haven't recorded in a month, you and I, because the previous one was Synovia, it was me and Synovia. I don't know if you listened to the previous one, but basically I built that little test game and scrapped it and kind of ran into some things there. But the thing I've been doing for the past 2 weeks was working on a version of Pong, which I've done, and I've shown you, Yazeed, off outside of this podcast. We could talk about that. Yeah, that's basically going to be this entire episode. It'll probably be a short one.
Yeah, I mean, on my side of things, so the rewrite of Square was in progress, and then I got stuck on something, and I was like, I need to talk to Joseph about this, and then we didn't have the episode last time. I wasn't able to make it, so then for this one, we talked yesterday about it. But anyway, I'll get my updates on Square, and then we can talk about Pong, because I thought Pong was pretty dope. So, I don't know if people remember, probably not, but part of the rewrites for Square were like 3 pieces. There's like 3 things that I wanted to do. One, I wanted to make it more visually understandable. Like I wanted it to be more visually intelligible. And so I did that in a couple of ways. One, I changed the colors of the NPC blocks. So if you imagine Frogger, Square, you have like the blocks that move horizontally across the view, basically. And you touch them, you die, and you go back to your spawn point. And you start over again, trying to cross all of them to get to your endpoint. Prior to this, their colors were like a really bright lime green and like highlighter yellow, basically. Those are really hard to tell the difference of, even if you're not colorblind at all or color deficient at all. It's just a hard difference, and they're very like sharp colors on a black background. So those were changed to a darker blue and a darker red. So gone are those 2. Also, I put a little black space in between, meaning I shrunk them vertically so that instead of being 5 up and down, they were 3 up and down with 2, chunks on the top and bottom that were not visible, black. Just seeing the black background on the bottom, right? What this gives is like a little delineation between chunkies. And so that actually makes it easier to see and understand, like, this whole thing isn't just a moving color palette. It is like individuals moving across the board. All that is nice and dandy. So that's kind of like the visual side of things dealt with. I think I want to do this. Well, maybe it will come later, but one of the other pieces I want to do is select a palette for the player colors that are just easier to see with the colors that are already selected. So, dropping, dark reds, dark blues, blacks, grays, and greens. So, colors in between those, just to make it a little bit more visually understandable of who you are given everything else that's moving on the board. So that's kind of like where that is with that piece. Another piece that I wanted to address was switching to collision detection that's built into home games as opposed to like the custom one that I had built. That's all handled and done with. So, done and dusted kind of
Nice
thing going on. It wasn't too difficult. Another piece that I wanted to add on was a beginning modal that was basically like a wait screen. So it would wait for players to join, and then the host or any player really could say, I have all the players in here. We're green light. We're good to go. We're good for launch. We can start this game. And then a modal at the end when you get to your the 9th level was the last level. So when the first person who passes the 9th level, game's over, gives you a nice game over screen. That's also sorted out. So moving along pretty well for the visuals. The part that I wanted to do also was I wanted the NPC squares to move smoothly across the screen. So before this, they moved in 5 block chunks, basically like their width. They would jump forward 1 chunk, same as the player characters. I thought that was actually like kind of hard to understand and follow. So I wanted to have the NPCs move smoothly across the screen, and I wanted the player characters to jump and chug along, kind of like Frogger does, more similar to Frogger. That's the piece that actually tripped me up the most. And what I ran into was a tick rate issue where in order to make them move smoothly in small chunks, the tick rate needed to be so low that the game stuttered in consuming what I had was like a movement queue basically. And so instead of things moving slowly and in variable speeds across rows, so say like row 1, 2, and 3, they each move in their own different speeds. What I was running into was that the game was chunking it and being like, I need to consume the movement queue right now, and it would chunk forward and move all of them. And so wherever the NPC blocks started with, they would just move in those chunks and like really jerky. The end result from that was a conversation with Joseph yesterday, and I'll kind of recap briefly. But don't use tick for that. Use individual set timeouts, and that's pretty reasonable, understandable. And so I'll probably kind of change the logic around how the NPC movement happens. So instead of relying on tick and like a movement queue and all that stuff, to just being, the smoothness of the blocks are described there. That will probably make my life a little bit more difficult because I used to be able to leverage like tick to figure out when a collision detection should happen, since I needed to detect when an NPC block runs into you, you run into an NPC block, or no collision occurs. So some little more tweaks to the collision work will probably have to happen, but those will be minor overall. So nothing big, if that makes sense. But yeah, so Square changes. Expect the PR for Square with some quality of life updates that I think will make that game less hot doo-doo, more hot cocoa. You know what I'm saying?
Well, so I was gonna ask, when you were talking about the colors and stuff, what's your thing there? Like, do you know about color theory? Are you trying to apply some whatever? Or are you just kind of hitting the blunt and vibing out until you find some colors you like?
No, actually, it's oh man, my brother explained this to me in a way that I'm not gonna be able to replicate easily. But basically, there's like 3 color detectors. It's like green, red, and blue, and so like people deficient in them have a hard time differentiating those colors. And so what you want is colors with as big difference as you can get, basically. So I went with red and blue. I think if people are red blue deficient, that's gonna suck for them. But the smoothness thing should help, and also the little black space in between, like, because they won't because they won't be like shoulder to shoulder, as it were. They won't be like boop boop. They'll be like boop and a little space, then boop. I'm using hand gestures, and people listening on like Spotify or whatever, they're not gonna have a single idea of what I'm talking about. Basically, like there's a small, right, what I said was like compress the NPC blocks from being 5 blocks tall to being 3 blocks tall, giving 2 blocks of space on between NPC blocks, basically. That change also helps differentiate it. And even if somebody is color deficient, that change should hopefully be enough for them to differentiate the NPC blocks from the player blocks, if that makes sense.
I like that you put so much thought into accessibility. It's something that like I literally never think about, but it is important. I just like, colorblind people. It's like, yeah, there's the little option in a lot of games, colorblind mode, and I'm just like, who the fuck is colorblind? It's like, oh, a lot of people are colorblind.
Actually, this is by the by, but sometimes playing on colorblind mode, even if you aren't colorblind or color deficient, can help you with reaction times because it will make certain things more obvious. Like in like MOBAs, for example, playing in colorblind mode can help you differentiate like friendly abilities from enemy abilities more easily, if that makes sense. But yeah,
it's kind of more of like a just straight up signal instead of like an animation. It's not trying to be pretty, it's trying to give you information, which is actually kind of my kind of game. If Geometry Wars were somehow text based, it would be even better. It's just data, just information.
No shot you'd be playing text based Geometry Wars, brother.
That would be a fun, like a challenge to kind of interpret what that would even be and then make it in home games, a text-based Geometry Wars. But that's beside the thing. I was going to ask also, your initial thing, and this is kind of funny because I'm doing the same thing with Pong, but when you were originally making Squarer, still have difficulty saying that after like 2 years, you wanted to basically clone Frogger down to the mechanics of having the chunk and having the whatever, and like you said earlier, having a kind of smooth motion is more aligned with real Frogger. But at this point, Are you trying to make your own thing that is Frogger inspired, or are you trying to really fucking nail in on the Frogger? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think Frogger was especially like accessible. So I think what I'm changing it to is like more intelligible Frogger, if that makes sense. Frogger, the mechanics of Frogger will still be there. You'll still have your spawn. There still will be NPCs that you can't run into. There'll still be an end goal that you want to get to. That's all static. That all also the same. That's all exact as close to Frogger as I can get it. I really don't want to bring in the visual clutter of Frogger and how like at times like visually difficult it is to figure out where you are in relationship to things happening on the screen, especially like the original like older Frogger. I think that was less of a problem because it was just like black and white, but like Frogger is like 7 through 8 or whatever, there's like a lot more visual shit going on, and I wanted to like peel those back so that it's more intelligible, people understand. Because the other thing too is, in my head, the way people will play home games is on their cell phone at their boy's house or at their lady's house, at their friend's house, right? Or at somebody's house. And so having a lot of shit happen on a phone is not great. It is like really hard to figure out what's going on your phone sometimes. And so I think like in my head, like that's a big piece to it. Before, people used like the big CRTs or they were in an arcade or something, and that's all that they were looking at. Whereas like on your phone, you'll have like notifications coming in, like all that stuff, and just as you're hanging out with your friends, and you don't want too much visual clutter. You want to have good vibes. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if I've answered your question or just rambled on, but those are my thoughts.
No, you're trying to make like a Zoomer version of Frogger, which I understand. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
And like, so a lot of video content nowadays is vertical, like to meet the phone thing or whatever. And I think I have a couple games that have a kind of squished aspect ratio to meet a vertical screen like that too. So are you redoing it like with a new aspect ratio, or are you keeping it kind of default 16:9?
No, I think I'm going to keep the aspect ratio. I really would prefer people to play it horizontally. I feel like Frogger is just a game that you want to play horizontally instead of vertically. Like just in terms of like with the more people you play with, it's going to look increasingly shitty because it's like, I think the way I have it laid out right now is like you have like up to 10 people at once. And so if you have 10 tiny little squares booping around trying to get across, like it's not going to look right. I think horizontally it just makes more sense. But I mean, I'm not going to gatekeep if somebody really wants to play vertically. I mean, that's not my eyeballs that are going to be straining. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if they do vertically, it'd be even more fucked because they're looking at a 16:9 image up. Like it's like you're watching a YouTube video in vertical, right? Where you get it just smaller, basically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, but I don't know. Maybe a Zoomer does want to play a vertical Frogger. What does that look like? You know, maybe it's like swipe based, or I don't know.
You know, maybe it's swipe based actually would be smarter. I think for me.
Well, I just said that like for fun. We don't support swiping. Like the action of swiping is fucking insane if you think about it. Just how smooth my phone is or your phone is or whatever, with like tracking momentum when you go through a piece of paper or whatever, and how seamless it feels. Whereas on the actual device trying to read that natively, it's just a bunch of XY's going up fast, and you're supposed to like figure that out. I don't know. We don't have swipes. It's hard. Is my point. Yeah.
Do you ever? I do this on Spotify a lot, where I will try to swipe really hard so that it would just take me like a random chunk in my playlist, and then I'm like, in this chunk I will pick a song to listen to. Yeah. And then I'll do it again, and I'll like build like a queue of songs like just randomly selected through my playlist.
Yeah, dude, I'll fucking throw my finger out trying to do one of those.
Yeah,
it's to hurt myself.
I love how smooth swiping has become on phones. But anyway, I think that might be an interesting iteration for a Square, like vertical Square. But I think that would be better as like a different game, because I really don't. I have a hard time imagining the use case for somebody wanting to play Square vertically, and I mean that in terms of like, there's only so much that you can do to make visually clear what's happening on the screen when everything is like very small, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
already the NPCs are 3x5 in terms of like height to width. So I think that vertically that's going to look really really wonky because they're going to be like real long boys and real thin long boys. You know what I'm saying? Real toothpicks going across your screen in red and blue.
Yeah, I think it'll just be an iterative thing because I don't think we really know what we want to even make because we could do. You can really support a arbitrary combination of devices for any kind of thing. You can make a game where the expected setup is one desktop, one laptop, a tablet, and a computer and a phone, and maybe you have a thing where you can show different things based on device type, and so you have this crazy multi-device setup where you're all like in a war room commanding some shit or whatever, and that's the game design. But you can also just do straight up a 4x3 thing like I'm doing with Pong, where it's just old style aspect ratio, looks pretty much the same on every device, you know. So yeah, we can support it all, is what I'm saying. You know, it's very impressive the technology that we've built. It's top tier.
Let's go. I do once Square is wrapped up, I think, or once at least this pass is wrapped up, the game I really do want to make is that we talked about it before, is the like hide and seek style game. That's the
like
game
based on location.
That's the game. It doesn't even need to have geolocation, to be honest, because like unless you're playing in like an abandoned warehouse, people can only get so far normally. But I think it'd be really fun to have a game like that. But I don't know, that might require brain energy that I may or may not have in 2 weeks or whenever I wrap up Square.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I mean, there's like a bunch of cool shit. We should just make a list, or maybe the GitHub issues or something, of just list of cool shit of all of these ideas, like fastest typer in the West, the hide and seek game, whatever the hell war room I just made up, whatever, you know, and then maybe like I don't know, a community thing. It's like compete to make the best version of this game, and then we just get free labor from people. That'd be really nice. I don't know.
We'd have to put Dosh on the line probably.
Dosh?
Dosh.
What is Dosh?
Dosh is money.
What currency or what country uses that currency? Am I dumb? Is this like really common and popular?
I don't know about currently popular, but it is in the Merriam-Webster dictionary.
Well, there's a lot of words I don't know in the dictionary, Yazeed. I can't be dumb for not knowing all of them.
This says it's British and informal.
Okay, I don't give a fuck about Europe as a whole. So,
what if home games becomes hyper popular in Europe of all?
Then I will eat my hat, as they say.
You'll be learning French and German and Italian, and Spanish and Czech and I don't know, all the other languages of Europe.
Yeah. How about that? The first person to listen to this far in the podcast, tell me a language and I'll learn it. You know, thank you for probably getting the farthest in any episode. Someone that we don't know. Oh yeah, we can't know you, by the way. Big rule. But yeah, tell me what.
Do I really know myself?
It's a great question. Can I talk about Pong now?
Yeah, absolutely, brother.
Okay, so from the last episode with Synovia and I, basically I came to this conclusion that without basic physics or a basic movement system in home games and kind of interaction between things, you can't really make a lot of game ideas people would have. Something as simple like as collision detection for Square, like we're talking about. We have collision detection for these kind of moving blocks, but we don't have collision detection, for example, if I shoot a projectile at you and it hits your character. Like, it's fundamentally the same concept of moving blocks, but it's more active. It's a more game-like scenario, if that makes sense. It's like things move and collide and happen, and we don't really have any example of fluid motion like that. So thinking Pong is kind of the simplest active game I can think of, right? Just two paddles hitting a ball back and forth. I even started making... I was thinking of a new series called I Made a Game, where it literally just this, but instead of doing an active while I'm talking through the game development, I just do, it's what Synovia suggested. I just kind of check in during the process and then give a thing at the end, like more prepared instead of kind of just freestyling while I talk, because I recorded 2 hours of me trying to like fill the space, kind of like a bad Twitch streamer or whatever. I'm just like, so now I'm defining my variables. No, I don't know why this isn't working. I'm just like feeling like a fucking idiot, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back and editing it and being like, this sucks. So I'm trying to make like some sort of content or whatever based on Pong, but basically we have a functional version of Pong. It looks kind of like Pong. It's very simple, just black and white, you know, rectangle, whatever stuff. The ball is not a ball; it is a rectangle as well, and it just bounces between the two paddles. And I kind of fake the physics since I made the reflection logic or the bouncing logic. I think I've remembered what I need to do from trigonometry. The whole thing's a circle, like the whole every incoming angle of the ball, right, is basically just a line at a point in a circle. I really can't explain math, but it's a circle. I'm gonna figure it out. It's tangents and shit. That good old Sokotoa. Only reason I still remember that is because of Squidward when he so episode of SpongeBob. So yeah, I'm gonna do the trigonometry stuff and basically get the angles and all that math properly figured out, so it works better. But it kind of works right now with all the faked math. I've showed you, Yazeed. If you hit the ball exactly into a corner, the entire game crashes. And the velocity is kind of shitty. Like, it's all randomly generated speed at the moment. So the first couple runs when I was showing you, it was pretty slow. And so the ball was just kind of moving at a shitty rate and you were not impressed. And then I sped it up, which is what inspired you to do the tick rate stuff for Square. When I sped it up and the ball really started going, it was like, holy shit, this is a game. And then kind of that thing that I want to happen happened, which is what I've been talking about before, where you see the game running in a system, and if you don't think about the system, then you have a good system. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not thinking about how the fuck is it moving this fast, or how is that collision working, or whatever, if I'm not thinking about it because it's just going, it's like, holy shit, we made a game. So 50 years later, we made Pong in a web browser. Last little thing is I can't call it Pong. I was doing some Googling for like 5 minutes, and my understanding is Atari will sue me for calling something Pong, so I'm going to call it Sponge, because the middle of Sponge is Pong, and the other remaining letters are S and E, so it's kind of like Pong Special Edition. So hopefully Atari's lawyers don't hear this episode of the podcast, but it's totally Pong. But I'm going to call it Sponge.
Sponge.
Sponge, there we go. Or Sponge, Spongy. We'll workshop it. But that's basically what I've been doing.
I don't like Spongy, just I don't like Spongy, just put that one out there. yeah, I don't like that. But yeah, no, not really a whole lot else to report. I'm gonna finish up the Pong stuff and get that merge request or pull request figured out and finalized, and hopefully that is reviewed and done by the next episode, and then maybe I'll make some content about that, or maybe I'll just scrap it. But after that, just doing another game, maybe. Oh shit, no, actually what I wanted to do was controller support. I've been wanting to do that for like a fun little weekend project for the past couple years. Just thinking about the Pong stuff, and it's kind of a one player thing right now, and I need to update it to make it kind of properly handle multiple players. But I was thinking it'd be fun to just have it work on a controller or on a single keyboard where, you know, you're basically left stick controlling the left paddle, right stick controlling the right, and you kind of have to left brain, right brain it, and play with yourself or play against yourself with the controller, as a test and kind of a reason for me to make the controller support work the way it should. Mm-hmm. But in the past year or so, at least I think Chrome and maybe Firefox requires a secure context for controllers. And then that led me back to thinking about the whole HTTPS cert shit that I was doing, and thinking I'm probably going to scrap all of that I ever did. It's great that I learned about it. It's great that I talked about it. It's great that we have what we have, and we did what we did, and we had great times together. But I think that shit's done, because I think ultimately the solution is having a public relay server for your game server. Like, I'm running home games. I can opt into mirroring all of my home games game state, which is a very small amount, you know, in terms of data, whatever. Basically just sending it off to this us maintained service that is publicly available, HTTPS, and so some public person can come and spectate, right? This is that old idea, spectating or joining based on this kind of public server that's just
mirroring your private state, if that makes sense. And so then you get your secure context by just talking to that thing. You lose the speed because you're talking to this like through the public internet. I don't know if that's, I think that's slow still. I don't fucking know. But you would basically get the HTTPS stuff way easier than us generating, maintaining, and distributing certs for every single person. So you look confused, like you have a question or something.
Does that not cause problems if people want to run home games locally and don't want to do that? Don't want to use a public service?
No, because it's all opt-in. I mean, like you won't have a secure context.
No, that's what I mean. Because then they can't support controllers, or on Firefox they can't use their mic or webcam or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if people want it, we can build it. I don't think it's the thing to build first, because I think at the end of the day, we want public spectators and public games and stuff. Like, we just want that regardless, and I think that's more of a normie feature, like for regular people to be interested at all in this thing. Just have like, what the fuck is homegames.link? Give me a website and I'll put in a code like Jackbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's a foundational feature or whatever. And with that, we can kind of get this secure context stuff in the meantime. And if people, which I totally understand, not wanting to use an us maintained thing, I get it. At the end of the day, you're still using a cert that we give, and you're like talking to services that we maintain. But like we're always going to be involved unless you're just taking it offline with code that you maintain yourself and whatever, which is fine. Anyway, yeah, I don't know, but we'll build that if people want it. I just think that we should build the other thing first because it'll give us the secure stuff for free. Yeah. And I want to see what that runs, like how that runs. You know, if we can get Pong working as fast as we got it yesterday, but over the public internet, then someone should write us a check for something. I don't fucking know, you know, but we should get some sort of money. I'll wear a McDonald's t-shirt or whatever, you know, tell people that Big Macs are the best. I don't know. I'll sell myself to McDonald's.
I don't want to be sold to McDonald's.
We'll see, dude. Either the community supports us or McDonald's does, but something has to.
Listen, we're both repping the plain gray t-shirt. All right.
There we are.
We're not even sponsored by our own t-shirts.
It says Pong, but it could be your brand. Your brand here.
Your brand here. That would be a very funny ad placement spot. Nice. I don't think I have anything else. I don't know if you have anything else you want to talk about.
I don't. Not for this podcast. I also have to get it uploaded in like 3.5 hours. So if you want to call it here, that'd be fantastic with me.
Yeah, brother. I'm good with calling it here.
Well, then that's going to do it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, our music is done by our friend Tynan. He is Nitan on Bandcamp. That is Nitan, Nytan. You can find us on Twitter at HomeGamesIO. We have a website, homegames.io. You can contact us using the form at the bottom of the page. Send us questions, comments, feedback, concerns, game ideas, you know, whatever you like. Yeah, thank you for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.